Hi there, everyone, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 21st. Today we celebrate the Scottish botanist who's remembered for the phenomenon known as Brownian motion. We'll also learn about the woman remembered as the queen of the traditional English country garden. We'll have a little mini class on mistletoe and the etymology of its name. And we'll listen to a verse from a garden writer and forager who grew wild plants during the winter. We grow that garden library today with a book that features a dozen gardens by an incredible modern garden designer. And then we'll wrap things up with a century-old article that shared a new way to water plants. But first, I just wanted to take a second to tell you about the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. Each and every Friday, even when the show is on break, subscribers to the newsletter get an exclusive email from me with some super useful content, including helpful reminders and tips for the week to help you grow as a gardener. I also include a handy list for you that features all of the books from the Grow That Garden library that were mentioned on the show the past week. So that's all right there for you. And then I provide a brand new botanist profile along with 2 pieces of botanical poetry that have not been shared on the show. And you'll also get plenty of garden-inspired recipes, gifts, and hacks. I love all of that. And finally, I like to make the newsletter a little more personal. So you'll see photos and stories about my own home and garden, in addition to exclusive updates about the show. I think of it as a little behind-the-scenes VIP experience for super fans of the podcast. And don't forget that each week, one lucky subscriber will be chosen as a winner for a lovely gardening book from the Grow That Garden Library bookshelf. And I like to say, if you enjoy the podcast, you're going to love the newsletter. So head on over to thedailygardener.org and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. Here's today's curated garden news. Today's article comes from the website Well and Good, and it was written by Emily Lawrence. The title of the piece is 6 Healthy Winter Vegetables That Don't Require a Whole Lot of Space to Grow. What a great topic for those gardeners that are still growing but have some space constraints. Emily's piece starts out by suggesting crops like carrots and greens and garlic, of course. I always grow that on the edges of my garden. In any case, if you want to check this post out, if it sounds like something that you would be interested in, all you need to do is search for the word vegetable in the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community, because that's where I put all of my curated news articles and original blog posts. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the Scottish botanist Robert Brown, who was born on this day, December 21st in 1773. Robert made important contributions to botany and to science in general through his pioneering use of the microscope. In particular, he's best known for being the very first person to notice the natural continuous movement of minute particles. Today, we call that phenomenon of movement Brownian motion. Now, how did Robert come up with this? Well, for his 1827 experiment, Robert looked through his microscope at pollen immersed in water, and he started to notice subtle little movements of the pollen, even though the water was still. And here's what he wrote about it. These motions arose neither from currents in the fluid nor from its gradual evaporation, but belonged to the particle itself. At the time, Brown was unable to explain why the particles moved. It wasn't until 1905 that Einstein was able to understand the cause of Brownian motion fully. Einstein suggested that this motion was due to the movement of water particles, in essence, little atoms in the water that were bumping into the pollen. And I thought you'd get a kick out of this because Einstein also famously said, "If I could remember the names of all these particles, I'd be a botanist." Today, Brownian motion helps explain the spin from black holes. Robert Brown also coined the term for the nucleus in living cells. And in Latin, the term nucleus means little nut. I love that. I'm going to start calling my two boys nucleus heads. Anyway, Robert Brown was the first person to recognize the difference between angiosperms, which are flowering plants, and gymnosperms, or non-flowering plants like conifers. And houseplant enthusiasts will appreciate knowing that Robert named the Hoya plant genus after his friend and fellow botanist, Thomas Hoy, who was also a gardener for the Duke of Northumberland. Now, Robert also worked closely with a guy named Ferdinand Bauer, one of the world's most accomplished natural history artists. Together, they joined Captain Matthew Flinders on a ship called Investigator, and the Flinders expedition was the very first to circumnavigate Australia. With the assistance of Peter Good, who was hunting for viable seeds and live plants for Kew Gardens, Robert amassed a large collection of specimens during his years in Australia. And as a result of all of that time and work in Australia, Robert published a remarkable survey on Australian flora, which he called the Prodromus. The Prodromus opened doors for Robert Brown when it attracted the attention of Joseph Banks. The two became great friends, and Banks asked Brown to serve as his personal botanical librarian. When Banks died in 1820, he left his home, his collections, and his library to Robert Brown, along with a large yearly allowance. And today is the birthday of the English garden designer, lecturer, prolific garden writer, and one of the greatest gardeners of the 20th century, Rosemary Verey, who was born on this day, December 21st in 1918. Regarded as the queen of the traditional English country garden, Rosemary's garden masterpiece is a blend of nature and geometry, traditional and cottage. You'll see graceful draping of wisteria, blousy roses, warm stone, and symmetrical chimneys. And that all works together to create Rosemary's intimate, timeless, and genteel garden that has been described as a bucolic dream. And I thought you'd enjoy hearing Rosemary's thoughts on the winter garden. She said, "I love the garden in winter almost as much as the summer. Winter's palette is clear and spare, restrictive enough to curb the excesses of even the most daring gardeners." And I loved this last little bit the best. She said, "A garden in winter is the absolute test of the true gardener." So a garden in winter is the absolute test of the true gardener. So take a look out your window. Have you passed the Rosemary Verey test? Good question. The seeds of Rosemary's magnificent garden were sown in her relationship with a young landscape architect named David Verey. She married David in 1939, and the couple moved into his ancestral home, Barnsley House. It was a Cotswold stone manor house. Absolutely beautiful. Unlike garden designers who cut their teeth on other people's gardens, Rosemary honed her skills as a gardener and developed her signature style in her own backyard at Barnsley House. And after a while, Rosemary went on to work with many famous clients. She helped design Elton John's gardens at Woodside, and she also worked with Prince Charles. Rosemary Verey's book, Classic Garden Design, which came out in 1984, gives us insight into how much she learned from studying gardens of the past with their topiary, knot gardens, and box-edged beds. Many classic elements exist in her Barnsley garden. She mixes formal style with roses and herbaceous perennials, and that all softens and adds interest even in winter. And one of the many reasons Rosemary's garden garnered so much attention is because it was a departure from the formal style of English gardening that was so popular during the 1970s. And just to give you an example of how popular Rosemary's gardens were, she once opened her garden for a single day in 1970, and it became so popular that she opened her garden every day except for Sunday and was visited by over 30,000 people every single year. It's pretty incredible. Now, one of the most significant elements of Rosemary's Barnsley House garden is the yellow laburnum walk. Now, laburnums are small European ornamental trees that have hanging clusters of yellow flowers. Rosemary had seen Russell Page's laburnum arch, and that was the inspiration for her yellow laburnum walk. And if you ever see it, it is a vision. The laburnums romantically drape over a sea of allium that is parted by a concrete walkway that is textured with pebbles. And if you've ever heard any of my previous shows, you know how much I love alliums, and I think most gardeners would agree with me. And so if you can envision a sea of alliums, those beautiful purple globes, having a ceiling of yellow flowers draping down over the top of them, I mean, it is absolutely glorious. And that's why many people consider Rosemary's laburnum walk to be one of the most iconic garden plantings of the last 50 years. And it was Rosemary Verey who introduced and popularized the potager. Today, Rosemary's potager garden is one of the favorite attractions to visitors of the fabulous grounds at Barnsley House. And today, you can go to Barnsley House because it's no longer a family home, because the Verey family transitioned it into a boutique hotel and spa. And Rosemary once said this about Barnsley House: "Although I arrived here more than 50 years ago, I constantly try to see the garden with new eyes. This is the wonderful thing about gardening. Trees are ever growing taller, shrubs developing, and ground cover taking over. Then scene changes, and every year has its own character, influenced by frost, rainfall, and sunshine, elements over which we have no control. But we can aim to plan so that each season has its moments of interest, with winter scent, spring blossoms and bulbs, summer exuberance, and autumn color." And it was on this day, December 21st in 1997, that the Saskatoon Sun out of Saskatchewan, Canada, shared an article about the tradition of mistletoe. Here's what it said. "Mistletoe is especially interesting botanically because it is partially parasitic. As a parasitic plant, it grows on the branches of trees, sending out roots that penetrate into the branches to take up nutrients. Now, the common name mistletoe is derived from the ancient belief that the plant was propagated from bird droppings. And this belief was related to the then accepted principle that life sprang spontaneously from dung. In fact, mistletoe is derived from an Old English word, mistletoe. Mistle is the Anglo-Saxon word for dung, and tan is the word for twig. So mistletoe translates to dung on a twig. Nice. Well, by the 16th century, botanists had discovered that the plant's sticky seeds tended to cling to the bills of birds so that they were left on branches where birds rubbed their bills to clean them. So there you go, a little primer on mistletoe. In Unearthed Words, today's words are from a garden writer and forager, Susan Tyler Hitchcock, from her book, Gather Ye Wild Things. Most weeds don't make it through winter. They need warm rain and steady sun. Frozen soil inhibits root growth. Snowfalls discourage sprouts. Even watercress, which usually positions itself in flowing water, gets hurt by a freeze. If you live in an area where snow falls over several months, you know that small sigh of sadness when you go out to gather wild things and frost has taken over. This year, I've been cultivating weeds indoors to ease those winter doldrums. I've got chicory, dandelion, and poke roots potted in buckets in a kitchen corner. I've got watercress stretching out of a pot, standing in fresh water. And I've got chickweed daily going to seed 3 months early on the windowsill. And while my wild winter garden doesn't provide the abundance of the outdoors, it grows leaves enough to garnish winter meals with sprigs of wild flavor, nutrients, and color. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Gardens of Luciano Giubile by Andrew Wilson. This book came out in 2015, and it's the second edition. In this book, Andrew showcases the incredible work of the garden designer Luciano Giubile. Known for the understated elegance of his garden designs, Luciano utilizes the composition of space and evolves his approach to suit his clients and his maturing ideas. This book spotlights a dozen gardens from Luciano's portfolio, and every detail is shared, from mood boards to final planting. Andrew's book thoughtfully includes pages on nursery production, site development, sourcing plants, the artists that Luciano works with, Luciano's working methods, and how Luciano finds inspiration. And I love that level of detail. This book is 240 pages of Luciano Giubile's work. It's a coffee table book and a celebration of a magnificent dozen of Luciano Giubile's creations, along with planting plans, archival documents, and gorgeous photographs from garden photographer Stephen Wooster. You can get a copy of The Gardens of Luciano Giubile by Andrew Wilson and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $47. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, December 21st in 1917, over 100 years ago, that the Weekly Tribune out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, shared a little story about the right way to water plants. Now, back in 1917, the concept of watering plants via wicking was new and confusing. Here's a little glimpse into how it was introduced to the general public in this article. Lucien Daniel, a French botanist, has discovered that young hothouse plants and slips of vegetables, as well as flowers, thrive far better by a system of continuous watering than by drenching the soil at stated periods. The new method depends on the law of capillary action. Near each plant is placed a jar containing water, into which is dipped one end of a strip of linen or cotton, whose other end lies near the plant. With this uninterrupted supply of water, drop by drop, the plants thrived, greatly outdistancing other plants which were submitted to an intermittent drenching. And there you go. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.